This is Gyokuyou. She's the best schemer in the Apothecary Diaries. She won the biggest war in the series because of it, by not scheming at all. What? And once you look at how she survived a toxic family and crawled her way to the top, that contradiction starts to make a lot of sense. So the biggest war in the Apothecary Diaries has technically already ended. And no, I am not talking about the assault on the Shi clan. I am talking about the other war, the very stressful war for the Empress's throne. And the winner is Mommy. Well, Gyokuyou, she is a mommy though. And honestly, looking at her now, it feels almost obvious. She's elegant, calm, always composed, compared to the other consorts who are a bit messy. It almost feels like she was destined to win. But after reading the novel, yeah, no. Gyokuyou was not the favorite, not even close. So before we talk about how she survived the inner court, let's rewind a bit and talk about where she actually came from. So Gyokuyou comes from the west, and the anime tells us she has ties to the merchant world there. That part is true, but the details matter a lot here. Her father, Gyokuen, was a merchant who later became a governor, but Gyokuyou's circumstance was a really complicated matter, because Gyokuyou was born from his mistress. Her mother was a dancer Gyokuen encountered one day in the western capital, and that fact changes everything about Gyokuyou's life. Inside her own family, Gyokuyou was not treated well. She was antagonized by relatives, looked down on by people who clearly didn't see her as important. Her brother, who was around 20 years older than her, straight up called her a foreign spawn. And even though Gyokuyou was loved by her father, she grew up with this constant fear in the back of her mind that the love was conditional, that if she stops being useful it could just disappear. So she grew up never fully sure who was on her side and who wasn't. But then, a big change suddenly happened. The new emperor had just been crowned, and Gyokuen instructed Gyokuyou to enter the outer palace. By the way, Gyokuyou was 14 at that time. But for Gyokuyou, the inner court wasn't some grand opportunity for her family or for her to become the empress or something. It was simply an escape route for her. An escape from siblings and his spawn who made her life miserable. And that's where things get really interesting. So, after hearing Gyokuyou's background, there's probably one really obvious answer that comes to mind. Why didn't she just cut her family off? Look, that advice isn't wrong. In psychology, when you're dealing with really nasty people, manipulators, abusers, dark triad types, psychological studies around it are usually point to one direction. Don't engage. Just leave. And that for a good reason, trust me, because dealing with these people, it costs too much. Even if you win, for instance, they hold grudges. There's always around 2, around 20 with these types. Sometimes they just don't even care if the fight destroys them too. So for normal people, like me and you, who actually want to live their lives, leaving is often the healthiest option. But somewhere along the way, that really great advice turned into what I like to call the Reddit answer. Oh, your manager sucks? Just quit, bro. Yeah, as if careers grow on trees. And that's a problem with this so-called the Reddit advice, because just leave completely falls apart the moment you're stuck inside a system you can't walk away from. For example, Gyokuyou leaving her family, that part makes sense. But where did she escape to? The inner court. That's like trading one dangerous environment for another. So yeah, what I'm trying to say here, cutting people off can be a correct advice. I've done it myself, it worked for me. But it can also be a really terrible advice, especially when you have things to lose. So let's put this Reddit coded answer to the side. There's little value for us to talk about it right now. And let's ask another question. If Gyokuyou couldn't just walk away from the inner court, what actually kept her safe? The interesting part of Gyokuyou's early background is that it is kind of similar to someone. Remember Lishu? Lishu was also 14 when we first met her. She was spiraling down towards her own destruction. She was unwanted by her family, thrown into the inner court, and immediately targeted. But this is where things split. I mean, Gyokuyou was smart even as a child, but still. 14-year-old kid inside the inner court is still just a kid. And it's not like Gyokuyou was a born schemer or anything. So what's the main difference between them? Before anyone like Kanan stepped in, Lishu had literally no one. Gyokuyou did. And her name is Hongyang. If you've watched the Apothecary Diaries closely, you will notice a recurring pattern in the series. Almost every major disaster in the inner court starts with a problem between a consort and her ladies-in-waiting. Li Hua nearly had a miscarriage. Li Shu was bullied by her own attendants. Lady Aduo's chief lady-in-waiting tried to poison Li Shu. Press F for Li Shu, girl can't catch a break, honestly. But with Gyokuyou, she's weirdly stable. And the main reason for that is Hongyang. Hongyang is Gyokuyou's chief lady-in-waiting, but what people don't know is that she's been with Gyokuyou as a reminder since Gyokuyou was a kid. Hongyang taught Gyokuyou many things, stops a lot of disasters from happening, and also keeps Gyokuyou aware of her surroundings. In the novel, Hongyang is considered super competent and also super loyal, which is also a big reason why, when Gyokuyou became the empress in her neat 20, yeah, this is around 20 guys, Hongyang was already 32 and still hadn't married yet. She literally married her job. But that doesn't mean, other than Hongyang, other ladies-in-waiting don't matter. They matter, of course, but there's also one point to be made about Gyokuyou's strategy here. Gyokuyou keeps her circle small, almost suspiciously small. Just think about it, when Mamo joins her, she only has 4 ladies-in-waiting. There's Hongyang, Yinghua, Guiyuan, and Ailan. Before that point, Gyokuyou had more people. Some left to get married, others were removed by other jealous women when Gyokuyou got too close to the emperor. I think you get the point. It's a really cruel condition to be in, but fortunately, there's silver lining here. It's easier to worry about 4 people than 40. Having a small number trustworthy allies is what allowed her to stay being herself, the kind, compassionate Gyokuyou, even in a system that punishes kindness. So allies keeps you safe, up to a point, because what if the problem isn't originated from others, but from herself? And this is when I tell you about a concept called KISS. Actually, there's a funny way to think about Gyokuyou's role in the inner court. It's basically a job, right? A very high risk, very stressful, extremely political job. And like any job, it has a core objective. In Gyokuyou's case, the objective is actually pretty simple. Produce an heir to the throne. That's it. But this is where a lot of consorts actually mess up. Look, for these concubines, outshining others is part of the job. But when you're that close to power, people tend to go out of line, to say the least. This is where all the drama, all the mind games, the poisoning, and the backstabbing come from. These silly actions of backstabbing and funny mind games are actually hindering them from reaching the main payload. Because let's be honest here, realistically speaking, there's no way the emperor would choose some backstabbing dirty bitch as his empress. And this is where KISS comes to play. KISS, keep it simple, stupid, is a concept musicians usually use in their playing. It's a reminder not to add unnecessary notes just because you can. Playing music is fun, so oftentimes people have to be reminded that in a lot of contexts, less is more. In the context of the Apothecary Diaries, these extra needless notes include making enemies of other concubines, adding too much spice in your life by unknowingly seducing the emperor's younger brother. And Gyokuyou follows this principle almost perfectly. Okay, it has to be acknowledged first that if we're talking about grabbing the emperor's attention with beauty, Gyokuyou just wins, bro. If you think otherwise, you're wrong. She fits the emperor's preferences, she has a distinctive look, she's eye-catching, okay? But aside from that, she doesn't try to do everything. She just goes all in on the part of the job that actually matters. Building intimacy with the emperor, maintaining favor, and repeat, without turning it into a spectacle. Even Mama points this out. At one time, Mama accidentally heard Gyokuyou and the emperor doing their job. Mama was impressed and called it advanced hanky-panky. It sounds really silly, I know, but for Gyokuyou, that's what matters, you know? So basically, she wins by being reliable, not adding unnecessary risks while still having fun around it, through a kiss. Well, maybe kinda literally in this case. I'm gonna be honest, I want to keep this part short, mostly because I don't really enjoy talking about it. You'll see why. So, to illustrate this point, let's take a look at episode 37. So, in that episode, Momo decides to help Xiaolan secure her future by working at the inner court's public bath. Because honestly, who knows what's going to happen to Xiaolan after inner court? On the surface, it looks harmless. It's just another kind thing to do. But Momo is worried about it. And honestly, she should be, because at that time, she's working under Gyokuyou. And as I mentioned earlier, the Jade Pavilion has very few ladies in waiting. So under normal circumstances, there's no way Hongyang would allow Momo to work elsewhere, especially for other concubines. But Gyokuyou allows it, and Momo quickly understands why. So the inner court's public bath is massive. It can hold over 1,000 people at once, which makes it a perfect place for information to flow. Or, more bluntly, gossip. Look, gossip is one of the oldest social tools humans have. Not because it's nice, but because it works. It serves two main purposes in this context. First, it's defensive. It tells you who to stay away from. I think it's very clear on that. But also second, it's also an offensive tool, but might not true what people think. The most effective way to deal with truly awful people, it isn't confrontation, it's isolation. And isolation usually happens through gossip. And that's also why I don't really enjoy talking about this part, because look, I grew up in a pretty traditional Asian culture. Gossip was not seen as something for boys to do. Boys weren't expected to gossip. We were expected to punch our friend and move on. Incredible system, just as how I like it. And by the way, we are strictly talking about offline gossip. If we're talking about the internet, oh god. We live in an era where people gossip for money. So that means 10% truth, 90% exaggeration, and at that point, you might as well call it a lie. The biggest joke I heard this year, 2026, is how some people say that cancel culture centers around internet people's accountability. Let's get back to the point. So there's a very clear pattern running through Gyokuyou's story. And it's because the inner court isn't just a place to keep concubines. It's also a system designed to test them. Most people fail that test by confusing cruelty for strategy. They play barbaric, domineering. They dress up foul play as outplaying others. But the ones who actually understand the game realize something important. In a system designed to chew people up, power doesn't come from being ruthless. It comes from careful play. Because sometimes, the best scheme you can play is to let bad people self-destruct.